President Obama's legacy, for me, as someone who, as a mom who's raising twin 16-year-olds and a 12-year-old, is going to be that for them, they'll grow up in a America that has a much stronger economy than it was when he took office. That is one in which we have health care as a right and not a privilege, that they won't have to worry, thankfully, about whether or not they're going to be able to go to the doctor if they're sick, that has the opportunity to get a good education. And if we had Republican cooperation, we could make sure that education was affordable and that young folks didn't have to worry about being financially strapped throughout the majority of their adult life after college.
Well, that is the DNC chairwoman, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, discussing President Obama's legacy. In tonight's State of the Union address, expected to spend quite a bit of time on just that. And a brand new web poll shows that the economy is the #1 issue on voters' minds. National security, #2. And with Iran holding 10 American soldiers, if you saw the headlines earlier tonight, reinforcing the fact that the world is a dangerous place. Pentagon does say the Iranians have agreed to release them shortly, but this still a situation, of course, we'll be following. Let's bring in our panel to discuss this. Nan Hayworth, former Republican Congresswoman from New York, Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, and Steve Rothman, a former Democratic Congressman from New Jersey. Thank you all guys very much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Richard.
Let me start with you. The same question we posed to your old counterpart there in the House, the legacy of this president. How would you sum it up?
A legacy of disappointment, of potential unrealized. President Obama came into office, a historic figure who really had an enormous amount of goodwill, and that was very encouraging. And unfortunately, although he had portrayed himself as someone who would effectively work across the aisle, I think he, in significant ways, failed to do so. And I disagree on every count with Debbie Wasserman Schultz. The economy has not thrived. Well, but it hasn't. If you look at the, I mean, yes, not only the headline unemployment rate has declined, but the labor force participation rate is the lowest it's been in 40 years. It's only about 62%. That's a terrible legacy to leave Americans.
You know, you mentioned tone. The president said in an earlier interview today that was one of his biggest regrets, that he wasn't able to change the tone of Washington. Being outside of it, is that something he realistically could have done? Does it take two to tango? Could he have changed it if he did things differently or not?
I do think so. And Democrats on the Hill, from both House and Senate perspectives, describe the president as regrettably aloof in his relationships with legislators whose alliance and cooperation he really needed.
Well, let me go across the table or the other side of the aisle, Congressman. From your perspective, his legacy, how do you think he's going to be remembered?
Oh, I think he'll be remembered as probably one of the best presidents we've ever had, probably in the top 10. With regards to the economy, we have the lowest unemployment rate, most jobs added, the lowest deficit as compared to our GDP than before he took office. And he pulled us through the worst recession since the Great Depression. Overall, if you ask any of our competitors in the world or enemies, Iran, China, North Korea, Russia, anyone in the Middle East, anyone in South America, would you trade your economies for America's? The answer would be absolutely, in a heartbeat. We are the world's envy in terms of our military strength, strongest nation on the planet, and our economic strength.
You were there for part of his administration. Democrats privately, if there was one regret and also one pleasant surprise, they never thought he'd get X through, and also they were disappointed he never moved hard enough on Y. What would it be?
Well, it takes two to tango. One of the reasons I'm so thrilled with my friend Paul Ryan having assumed the speakership of the House, wish it was Nancy Pelosi, but Paul Ryan's a good person, smart guy, and a great representative. He, as Speaker, helped Obama work out a compromise with the House and the Senate, which are both Republican-controlled, as you know, in order to avoid a government shutdown and compromise on infrastructure, on keeping the government open, on some tax cuts, on some tax increases, all to strengthen the country. That was Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, working with Obama. In my 16 years in the House, I went through all the iterations from Newt Gingrich's speaker to Nancy Pelosi and Danny Hastert before her to John Boehner and then Paul Ryan. It does take two to tango. There was a McGovernite faction back in the day in the 70s that were left-wing extremists, if you will. I'm a Democrat, so I can say that. There came to pass, when in my time in Congress, some Republicans who had some very extreme views as far as I was concerned, and those Republican friends of mine from the Northeast, they didn't recognize them as Republicans. But there's been a lot of changes, and I'm looking forward to Paul Ryan working with Obama and having a productive last year for Obama in office.
He had a productive 7th year, Dominic. Whether people like him or don't like him, he got more stuff done than people thought he would. To that end, the legacy, although not yet written, he's going to spend a lot of tonight talking about the accomplishments. He's going to try and paint a contrast to some of the tone we're hearing from presidential candidates on the right here about how bad things are. Potential unfulfilled with this president in your eyes, or will history look back as kindly as the congressman says it will?
I honestly believe, Richard, if we take half of what was just said here, with
we the
Congresswoman-
politician, Dominic.
No,
Yeah.
I'm serious. And we take half of what was said here with this member of Congress. In the middle, I think somewhere is the truth. I do agree with the assessment. It does take two to tango. But I do believe that this president could have sent, maybe the Republicans would not have worked with him, but he could have sent more signals than he did, that he was trying to reach across the aisle. So I think that was a mistake, and it played into what critics, I see the congressman wants to disagree, it played into what critics wanted to say about him. But at the same time, I think that it's hard to define his legacy right now. The Supreme Court has helped his legacy. I think as time goes on, as it is with every president, his legacy is going to greatly improve because he took over an economy that was in a very
one
bad
of the
position.
big issues, and I want to get into it, they're giving me the rap time, but I want to give you a chance to on the other side.
Sure.
One of the big issues that he even says that he's frustrated he hasn't been able to do more on is the subject of gun violence in this country. And the president expected to address that issue again tonight. Certainly a lot of debate about executive action recently on it. When we come back, we'll speak with a congresswoman who represents the town of Newtown, and specifically the Sandy Hook tragedy here that has really come to define so much of this tragic issue. Stay with us.